of the conference is connecting forces to innovate, adapt, and thrive. And we chose that as our theme for the conference because that's really what we're trying to do at NextWealth, is to help firms adapt and innovate to thrive amid the change happening all around us, but also to draw on the theme of the building, this incredible institution that we're standing in. So the work that Michael Faraday was doing in his lab on electromagnetism, playing up on that idea of forces that attract and repel, and thinking about how we can add that into the theme of the day. So we've primed our speakers, and hopefully we'll be able to play on that theme throughout the day. We think that there are a number of forces exerting change on our industry, and it's not just our industry, it's a society as a whole. All businesses are struggling with the amount of change and disruption that's happening. There's technological change, there's demographic shifts, that's changing customer expectations of how they want to interact with firms. And of course, there's geopolitical change. And in our industry, we can't ignore, and we don't ignore, regulatory disruption and legislative change as a source of change as well. And we think that there is this unprecedented level of change happening, but that opens all sorts of opportunities to think differently about how we do things. But in thinking about change, often we find that what's so obvious in hindsight is actually quite hard to see at the time. The changes that technology have on businesses, it seems in hindsight like those companies that were disrupted and put out of business should be able to see what's happening to their businesses, but it's very hard to see at the time. And there's this growing body of research around knowledge bias or status quo bias, where the people who are closest, the people who are most expert, the companies that are most deeply steeped within an industry actually have the hardest time seeing the implications of change. And what we want to do today is just try and pull you out of that deep expertise within your company to think more broadly across the industry about how, as a cross-industry, we need to think about innovation and change to disrupt, not just for the benefit of our companies, but the benefit of our customers. Because we think that if financial institutions and retail investing institutions, which is the focus here, thrive, that our customers will thrive as well. Now, you might have seen this statue when you came in this morning. This is a statue of Michael Faraday, and this is a statue that's right behind the registration desk when you came in. Now, when Michael Faraday was doing his work in his lab in this very building, factories were powered by steam engines or water wheels. And those factories there's a central shaft of source of energy in the middle of the factory. And workers were organized around that central source of energy. And what happened with the dawn of electrification, which of course was partly based on some of the great work that Michael Faraday did, was those factories simply pulled out that source of energy and replaced it with another. They kept doing the same thing they'd always done, but just replaced the energy source. And we didn't find any great leaps forward in productivity until decades later, when companies reorganized around the difference that new technology could offer, when they restructured the factories so that workers and their individual workstations had power to those individual workstations. And it was then that we saw this massive leap forward in productivity. Now, the book I'm going to be giving to the speakers today is one I'd recommend to all of you. It's by McAfee and Bryn Holfsen. Anyone who can pronounce that name later gets a prize, called Machine Platform Crowd. And if you reply to our survey after the conference to give your feedback, we will also give a lucky winner a copy of that book. But in that book, they document the demise of those factories because they failed to innovate. When we continue to do the same thing that we've always done, we don't take advantage of the new advances in technology. Now, a more recent example than those factories of the 1850s through to the 1920s is Netflix and Blockbuster. Now, that's a very well-documented story about the rise of Netflix and the demise of Blockbuster. Now, how many of you remember going into Netflix or into Blockbuster and paying just exorbitant late fees? Right? Huge sums of money, right? So the first thing that Netflix did was they disrupted that business model to create a membership-based model. No more late fees. beautiful, right? It plays to what the customer's biggest frustration was with Blockbuster. But then they, of course, learned from the data about what films people were borrowing, what was on their wish list to recommend content using algorithms, and learning from the data to be able to recommend content. And of course, we know what happened next. They then took advantage of the next leap forward in technology to stream the content into people's home. And then they not only were a platform, but also a manufacturer, combining the product with the platform for distribution. And you can see the valuation. Now, an interesting little fact, there are 2 Blockbuster stores still in operation today, but by the end of the week, there will be only 1. There's one in Australia that's closing this very week. So the brand is still alive, but Netflix, of course, superseded it. Now, Netflix's profitability is not always so secure, so let's look at a more profitable business that has managed to disrupt. This is a picture of a Hema supermarket. It's Alibaba's take on supermarkets in Shanghai, and they've got a few of these supermarkets. So it's a supermarket, restaurant, and fulfillment center in one. And as you'd expect, people walk through the store and take pictures of the barcode to purchase products, and then as they check out, they pay using their Alipay account. That nice, that experience for that customer is quite seamless. But there's a few things that they've done that I think is really important. They recognize some of the preferences of the customer, and this is a picture of Jack Ma having reached in to a tank of water and fished out his own Alaskan king crab. And one of the important cultural things that Alibaba recognized was that Chinese consumers like to be able to pick their own shellfish, and they want to pick a live shellfish and choose it themselves. And so if they removed that from the experience in the supermarket, then it would fail. And so understanding what it is that our customers value and what they want, and making sure that that's integrated into that new experience is critical to success. Now, Jack Ma then walked over with his live Alaskan king crab, brought it to the restaurant where a chef prepared it for him, and it was delivered, as you'd expect, on a conveyor belt by robot to his table. So they've incorporated not just the supermarket, but the restaurant where people can choose the products that they want prepared for them. And that creates that social environment, thinking about how do you keep people in that environment, keep them for longer. And a really interesting thing that they've done is the fulfillment center. So rather than, I don't know how many of you have been to the supermarket and you're fighting past these massive crates where people are, filling up the online shopping orders. It's a terrible use of floor space and is disruptive to the other shoppers. What Hema have done is they have a conveyor belt that runs along the ceiling. You can see it at the top here. So the employees fill bags with people's online shopping, hook it onto a conveyor belt. It's carried across the ceiling, put into a cooler box on the back of a moped, delivered to the customer who ordered that within 30 minutes of having placed the order. And that is a profitable venture. So that's an example where they've still got the supermarket, still got the physical architecture, but are doing things fundamentally different to make best use of that space. So what do our clients want? What's the equivalent of reaching into the tank and pulling out the Alaskan king crab? Well, we thought the best way to find out was to ask them. So we did a survey of investors. It's a survey that's done regularly of about 200 active investors, which means they're adding money to their account on a regular basis. It's not a huge sample, but we took a slice of that to ask the people who pay for financial advice why they pay for financial advice, to understand what is it that they value most. And the 2 things that came up at the top, I don't think will be a surprise to anyone in this room, but better potential investment returns and peace of mind. And those 2 are obviously really closely related. So when we think about what we're delivering to our customer and what we need to disrupt around, this is what we need to keep. We need to keep that peace of mind for customers and the perception that they have access to better potential investment returns. Now, we think that financial advice has become I have to say, so this is Peter's term, and I have to give him credit because he's sitting in the room. If I didn't give him credit, I'd get a kick later. But Peter used this term, over-complexification, to refer to what was happening in the RDR, I believe. And we think that that's happened to what's happened with financial advice is it's become over-complicated. We did a survey with Funds Network that was published last month. We have copies here, and Jackie Boylan, I'm looking around for, I know she's here, is going to be on our next panel. They were the sponsors of this research, but we asked advisors what their biggest business challenges were. And it wasn't giving clients peace of mind. It wasn't finding those opportunities for better potential investment returns. It wasn't finding new customers. It was dealing with the regulatory burden and the complexity around regulation, the changes that are happening. 80% of advisors said that was among their top 3 business challenges. Half said it was number 1. And we think that if we could better support financial advisors to make their lives easier, that we would make a massive difference to our customers and we would thrive as an industry. Now, given that we're in this institution steeped in science, it's probably appropriate to share our periodic table of the essential elements of financial planning. So to illustrate this complexity of financial planning, we put together this periodic table a few weeks ago showing the different elements of financial planning. There's copies on our stand if you'd like a copy. But you can see there's client implementation, implementing the recommendation, there's the regulatory framework, and sitting on that bedrock of the credentials and education that financial advisors have. How many of those things feed in to what customers value from financial advice? A lot of them do, but do they have to be delivered by the individual who's offering that advice? I think we need to challenge our thinking about how we deal with our customers and the burden that sits with financial advisors. So I've already asked this question, is this what clients want? And I want to give an example of Wealthfront in the US. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, Wealthfront, it's not about robo. And I think the delivery, that final, that last mile is actually the least important bit. What's interesting to me about Wealthfront is the power that's in an individual's pocket. And it could be in the advisor's pocket. Imagine this in the pocket of an advisor. So the quote, you don't have to tell us, we already know, it's in the data, and we'll adjust our advice accordingly. They have an army of data scientists, of actuaries, of computer programmers who are crunching data to be able to predict what people will be able to get from Social Security payments, the impact of inflation, what potential performance will be of the portfolios they're invested in. They then look at individual customers' transaction data using their banking information to be able to predict what the cash flow needs of that customer might be in retirement, where they might be able to save to be able to invest more, how other people are spending their money in retirement to be able to offer tailored recommendations to customers. That, in the pocket of a financial advisor, would be incredibly powerful. But I think that the regulatory framework within which we're operating in, the siloed nature of our industry, is holding us back. And so I challenge us to think differently today about what we could do to really disrupt and change to help us thrive as an industry, but also our customers. I want to end with this quote, and I need my crib sheet for this. So Garry Kasparov is the famous chess player who's a world chess champion, defeated by Big Blue, he was in the 80s, and he became a real advocate for human and machine working together. And he gave a talk last year where he talked about how we can work with machines, how we can work with technology to do exciting things as human beings. And he said, if we fail, it's not because the machines are too intelligent. It's not because they're not intelligent enough. It's because we became complacent and limited our ambitions. What differentiates us as humans isn't our ability to pick a stock or, as he says, swing a hammer or move a chess piece across a board. What differentiates us as humans is our ability to dream. And so what I'd encourage you to do today is just open your mind, dream big, think about what's possible, and then how that might convert to what you could do differently within your own organizations. Thank you.